Ukrainian emergency crews on Monday sifted through what was left of a Dnipro apartment building destroyed by a Russian missile, placing bodies from one of the war's deadliest single attacks in months in black bags and gingerly carrying them across steep piles of rubble. Authorities said the death toll from Saturday's strike rose to 40 and that 30 people remained missing Monday. Tall cranes swung across the jagged gaps in a row of residential towers, the engines growling as residents of one of Ukraine's largest cities watched largely in silence under a gray sky. About 1,700 people lived in the multi-story building, and search and rescue crews have worked non-stop since the missile strike to locate victims and survivors in the wreckage. The regional administration said 39 people have been rescued and at least 75 were wounded. The reported death toll put it among the deadliest attacks on Ukrainian civilians since before the summer, according to the Associated Press Frontline War Crimes Watch project. Residents said the apartment tower did not house any military facilities. The European Union's foreign policy chief, Josep Borrell, called the strike, and others like it, inhumane aggression because it directly targeted civilians. There will be no impunity for these crimes, he said in a tweet Sunday. United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres strongly condemned the Dnipro strike, saying attacks against civilians and civilian infrastructure violate international humanitarian law and must end immediately, UN Associate Spokesperson Stephanie Tremblay said Monday. Asked about the strike Monday, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said the Russian military doesn't target residential buildings and suggested the Dnipro building was hit as a result of Ukrainian air defense actions. The strike on the building came amid a wider barrage of Russian cruise missiles across Ukraine. The Ukrainian military said Sunday that it did not have the means to intercept the type of Russian missile that hit the residential building in Dnipro. Fierce fighting continued to rage Monday in Ukraine's eastern Donetsk province, where military analysts have said both sides are likely suffering heavy troop casualties. No independent verification of developments was possible. Donetsk and neighboring Luhansk province make up the Donbass, an expansive industrial region bordering Russia that Russian President Vladimir Putin identified as a focus from the war's outset. Moscow-backed separatists have been fighting Kiev's forces there since 2014. The Russian and Belarusian air forces began a joint exercise Monday in Belarus, which borders Ukraine and served as a staging ground for Russia's February 24 invasion of Ukraine. The drills are set to run through February 1, the Belarusian Defense Ministry said. Russia has sent its warplanes to Belarus for the drills. NATO member nations have sought in recent days to reassure Ukraine that they will stay the course. The United Kingdom has pledged tanks, and the U.S. military's new, expanded combat training of Ukrainian forces began in Germany on Sunday. Poland's prime minister urged the German government to supply a wide range of weapons to Kiev and voiced hope that Berlin would soon approve a transfer of battle tanks. Russian forces shelled the city of Kherson and the Kherson region, killing 3 people and wounding 14 others over the last 24 hours, regional governor Yaroslav Yanushevich said. In the city of Kherson, the shelling damaged a hospital, a children's disability center, a shipyard, critical infrastructure, and apartment buildings. Russian forces struck the city of Zaporizhia, damaging industrial infrastructure and wounding 5 people, 2 of them children, the deputy head of Ukraine's presidential office Kyrylo Tymoshenko reported. Russian air defenses downed 10 drones Monday over the Black Sea near the port of Sevastopol in annexed Crimea, Mikhail Razvozeyev, the Russian-installed head of Sevastopol, reported. 3 people were killed and 13 injured in an ammunition explosion in Russia's Belgorod region, RIA Novosti news agency reported on Sunday. Authorities said earlier on Sunday that 10 Russian servicemen were injured in the blast in a cultural center in the Belgorod region, which borders Ukraine and is the location of several Russian military bases and training grounds. The 112 and Baza telegram channels, which are associated with Russia's law enforcement agencies, said the dead and injured were Russian conscripts who were called up to fight in Ukraine under Russia's mobilization drive, announced last September. They reported that the blast occurred after a soldier mishandled a grenade in a local cultural center that had been converted to store ammunition. The death toll from a Russian missile strike on an apartment building in the southeastern Ukrainian city of Dnipro rose to 25 Sunday, President Volodymyr Zelensky reported as rescue workers scrambled to pull survivors from the rubble. Emergency crews worked through the frigid night at the wrecked multi-story residential building, the site of the worst casualties from a widespread Russian barrage Saturday. The attacks, which also targeted the capital, Kyiv, and the northeastern city of Kharkiv, ended a 2-week lull in the airstrikes Russia has launched against Ukraine's power infrastructure and urban centers almost weekly since October. Emergency workers clear the rubble after a Russian rocket hit a multi-story building, leaving many people under debris in the southeastern city of Dnipro, Ukraine, January 14, 2023. Russia fired 33 cruise missiles on Saturday, of which 21 were shot down, according to General Valery Zaluzhny, the commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian armed forces. Zelensky reported that at least 73 people were wounded and 39 people had been rescued as of Sunday afternoon. The city government in Dnipro said 43 people were reported missing. German weapons manufacturer Rheinmetall could deliver repaired Leopard 2 battle tanks to Ukraine in 2024 at the earliest, its chief executive was quoted as saying by Bild newspaper on Sunday. Germany announced earlier this month that it would provide Ukraine with 40 Marder infantry fighting vehicles to help repel Russian forces. But Kyiv has also requested heavier vehicles such as the Leopards, which would represent a significant step up in Western support to Ukraine. The German army has only around 350 Leopard 2 tanks today, compared to some 4,000 battle-main tanks at the height of the Cold War. Germany has become one of Ukraine's top military supporters in response to Russia's invasion after last year, overcoming a taboo that is rooted in its bloody 20th-century history on sending weapons to conflict zones. Russian President Vladimir Putin said that the military operation in Ukraine had gained positive momentum after Russia claimed control of Soledar in eastern Ukraine. This claim is disputed by Ukraine, which says its forces are still in the besieged salt mining town in the Donetsk region. Speaking on Sunday, the Russian leader said he hoped his soldiers would deliver more wins. If Russia is indeed in control of Soledar, it would represent a war success for Moscow, following months of battlefield setbacks. Putin now casts the war in Ukraine as an existential battle with an aggressive and arrogant West, and has said that Russia will use all available means to protect itself and its people against any aggressor. The United States and its allies have condemned Russia's invasion of Ukraine as an imperial land grab, while Ukraine has vowed to fight until the last Russian soldier is ejected from its territory. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's office said late on Saturday that Britain would send 14 of its main battle tanks to Ukraine, amid criticism from the Russian embassy in London. Additional artillery support was also promised. A squadron of 14 Challenger 2 tanks will go into the country in the coming weeks, and around 30 self-propelled AS-90 guns, operated by 5 gunners, are expected to follow, the British Prime Minister's office said in a statement. The UK will also begin training Ukrainian forces to use the tanks and guns in the coming days. EU to circumvent Hungary's veto of €18 billion aid to Ukraine in 2023. As the people of Ukraine approach their second year living under relentless Russian bombardment, the Prime Minister is dedicated to ensuring Ukraine wins this war, a spokesperson for the Prime Minister said in a statement. Sunak's office said earlier this week that Britain would coordinate its support with allies after Germany, France, and the United States all indicated last week they would provide armored vehicles to Ukraine. Russia's destruction of an apartment building in the Ukrainian city of Dnipro has sparked widespread condemnation of Vladimir Putin. The devastating missile strike on the block of flats on Saturday in the east of the country has claimed the lives of at least 35 people, while another 35 people are still missing. Up to 75 survivors were injured by the strike. Dozens of people are feared dead, trapped under the rubble. Former boxer Vladimir Klitschko, who joined the Ukrainian armed forces after Russia's invasion began last February and whose brother is mayor of Kyiv, tweeted an image of the aftermath of the devastating missile strike on Dnipro. While Russia has denied targeting civilians, some have pointed to the attack as being a clear indication of how Putin plans to wage his war. Belgian MEP Guy Verhofstadt called for a full set of sanctions to be imposed on all Western companies and individuals that deal with Russia in the wake of the Dnipro attack. Russia's initial invasion plan was to take over the country in a matter of weeks, if not days. However, Putin has recently acknowledged that he is preparing his military for the long haul. In December, he warned the Russian population that they should be prepared for the special military operation, as he prefers to call the war, to be a long process. Some commentators are increasingly convinced Putin plans to copy the military playbook he used so effectively in Aleppo, Syria. This saw a years-long, indiscriminate bombing campaign that destroyed hospitals and schools and killed and maimed thousands upon thousands of civilians. The next step in Ukraine could see a major new offensive launched by Putin in the spring, meaning Kyiv is locked in a race to build up its troops with support from the West. On Saturday, Rishi Sunak confirmed the UK will provide tanks to Ukraine to help it push Russian troops back. Sunak made the pledge during a call with President Volodymyr Zelensky prior to Russia's missile strike on Dnipro. Dnipro, Ukraine, January 15, 2023. Rescuers dismantled the rubble of a destroyed house that was damaged as a result of a missile attack by the Russian army. On January 14, the Russian army launched massive missile strikes on Ukraine. As a result of the shelling of the city of Dnipro, a rocket hit an apartment building. As of January 15, 30 people died, including one child, 73 people were injured, including 13 children. 43 people are missing. At least 35 people were killed in a Russian strike on an apartment building in Dnipro, Ukraine. Dnipro, Ukraine, January 15. A view from the site as search and rescue works continue in the wreckage area after Russian missile strike amid Russia-Ukraine war in Dnipro, Ukraine on January 15, 2023. The death toll from a Russian missile strike in eastern Ukraine rose to 30, more than 30 are missing, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Sunday. Sunak offered Challenger 2 tanks and additional artillery systems as a sign of the UK's ambition to intensify our support to Ukraine. The UK is the first Western power to supply the Ukrainians with main battle tanks. It comes after the US promised 50 Bradley tank-killing armored vehicles in its biggest military assistance package to date for Ukraine. Germany also announced it would supply about 40 Marder armored personnel carriers, and France promised wheeled AMX-10 RC tank destroyers. Joint Air Force exercises by Russia and Belarus on Monday sparked concerns in Ukraine that Belarus could be planning to join the war as part of a new Russian assault. While Belarus has not directly gotten involved in the war, Russia did use the country to launch its February invasion of Ukraine. Belarusian officials have maintained that they will not join the fighting. But the joint exercises, slated to continue until February 1, have renewed anxieties in Ukraine. The exercises will include joint air patrols, actions to support ground forces, air reconnaissance and transport flights, according to the Belarusian Defense Ministry. All of the country's air bases and firing ranges will be involved in the exercises. The coordination between Russia and Belarus comes as a Russian missile strike on an apartment building in the Ukrainian city of Dnipro killed at least 40 people, with many more still missing, according to Reuters. As of now, the fate of more than 30 people who could have been in the house at the time of the terrorists' missile hit remains unknown, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said in his nightly address. Russian missile strikes also hit Kyiv and other parts of Ukraine in recent days as part of the Kremlin's aerial assault as the war closes in on its one-year anniversary in February. When Putin launched his full-scale invasion of Ukraine last February, he expected his troops, which outnumbered and outgunned Ukraine's, to seize the Eastern European country's capital of Kyiv in a matter of days, but Putin greatly underestimated Ukrainian forces and miscalculated the Western response, which has taken the form of severe sanctions against Russia and military aid to Ukraine. In recent months, Ukraine has forced Russian troops to give up large swaths of occupied territory in a stunning counteroffensive. The fighting is taking its toll on both armies though. America's top general, Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, recently estimated that well over 100,000 Russian soldiers had been killed and wounded in the war so far, with the same thing probably on the Ukrainian side. The results for Russia are clearly not what was expected. Military analysts have told Insider that Russia botched its initial invasion, as well as follow-up actions, and that its assault on Ukraine has been stymied by misjudgments, poor communication, and mass confusion. The US and the West, Ryan emphasized in discussions with Insider, should be learning from Russia's mistakes. Russia's first mobilization of 300,000 reservists to beef up the Kremlin's forces in Ukraine was a goat rope. There were so many errors and problems and issues and obstacles, and it was primarily tied to the fact that none of these guys had much training. Looking at the future of the war in Ukraine and Western involvement, the West will probably increase its reactions to Russia's actions as they unfold. The US on Sunday began giving more advanced training to Ukrainian troops, suggesting that US authorities expect a ramping up of the conflict over the coming months, with Ukrainian forces aggressively taking the fight to Russia. General Mark Milley, chairman of the US Joint Chiefs of Staff, told The Washington Post on Sunday that training had started that day and was designed to make Ukrainian troops more effective against Russian forces, with a focus on preparing them for large-scale combat. The training is aimed at getting troops to maximize the effectiveness of combined weapons, their tanks, artillery, and combat vehicles, Milley said, according to the Post. Around 500 Ukrainian soldiers will go through its initial version, the outlet reported. Ukraine said that it expects a fresh Russian offensive in the spring, with Ukrainian intelligence warning that Russia plans to mobilize 500,000 additional troops from mid-January, a significantly larger number than the 300,000 soldiers Russia mobilized in September and October last year. In the past, American training of Ukrainian troops has been smaller in scale and focused on using specific weapons they have been sent, the Associated Press reported. This latest training is designed to help Ukraine better launch offensives against Russia and to counter Russia's own attacks, General Milley said. It also comes as the U.S. ramps up the type of weaponry it is sending to Ukraine. On Sunday, Ukrainian soldiers began arriving in the U.S. for training on the Patriot missile defense system, which the U.S. announced in December that it would provide to Ukraine's military. Other allies are also committing increasingly advanced military equipment to Ukraine, with multiple European countries agreeing to send Ukraine tanks for the first time since the conflict began. NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg said on Sunday that he expects more heavy weapons to be sent to Ukraine in the near future. The USA considered strengthening the air defense of Ukraine with equipment designed to counteract ballistic missiles, such as the one used in the attack on an apartment block in the city of Dnipro on January 14. Russian missile strike on house in Dnipro, the EU debates how to respond to Kremlin's signs of escalation. From the very beginning, our military aid to Ukraine in the context of air defense was based on Ukraine's needs at the moment. Kahl remarked that, currently, the American side is focused on equipping the Ukrainian air defense forces with shells for the Hawk and Buk systems, and added that the USA and Germany will supply Ukraine with the Patriot air defense systems that will serve as a decent protection against ballistic missiles. Kahl reminded the public that as soon as January 20, another meeting of the contact group for Ukrainian defense will be held at the Ramstein air base in Germany. In the Russian large-scale attack, a missile hit an apartment block in the city of Dnipro in Ukraine. According to the latest official reports, at least 40 people died. The search and rescue operation is ongoing. Yuri Ianat, spokesperson of the Air Forces of Ukraine, reported that the apartment building in Dnipro was hit with a Kh-22 ballistic missile. Such a missile can be destroyed with modern Western air defense systems such as Patriot or SAMP, but it cannot be done using the systems Ukraine has at the moment. British Foreign Minister James Cleverly will seek to bolster support for Ukraine on a trip to the United States and Canada which begins on Tuesday, ahead of the first anniversary of the invasion by Russia. Britain has been a steadfast supporter of Kyiv since Russia's invasion last February, and at the weekend pledged to send 14 Challenger 2 tanks and other heavy weaponry to Ukraine. Germany is under pressure to send Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine, but its government says such tanks should be supplied to Ukraine only if there is agreement among Kyiv's main allies, particularly the United States. Cleverly will tell U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Canadian counterpart Melanie Joly that it is the right time to go further and faster to give Ukraine military support. The British Foreign Ministry also said Cleverly would raise the topic of Iran while on the trip after Britain temporarily recalled its ambassador following the execution of British-Iranian national Ali Reza Akbari on Saturday. CIA Director Bill Burns met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on a secret trip to Kyiv ahead of the Russian invasion last year to share news that appeared to surprise the Ukrainian leader: the Russians were plotting to assassinate him. At that time, in January 2022, Zelensky had been dismissing the idea that Russians would carry out an unprovoked invasion of Ukraine and was suggesting America's public warnings were creating a panic, noted Chris Whipple in his forthcoming book, The Fight of His Life, Inside Joe Biden's White House. It was unusual for the U.S. to publicly disclose intelligence like this, suggesting Washington was confident in its assessment of Russia's intentions. But just weeks before Russia invaded, Zelensky expressed concerns that such warnings would have a negative impact on the Ukrainian economy, and emphasized that Kyiv was used to facing threats from Russia. Burns had come to give him a reality check, and the CIA director shared that Russian special forces were coming for Zelensky, writes Whipple, adding that President Joe Biden told Burns to share precise details of the Russian plots. Russia invaded Ukraine the next month, launching the largest military conflict in Europe since World War II. Since that time, Ukrainian officials have spoken about Zelensky surviving more than a dozen Russian assassination attempts. But Whipple, who interviewed Burns, gives readers a glimpse of how the stakes were laid out to Zelensky as he tried to push back on U.S. warnings about an impending invasion. The U.S. has been a key partner for Ukraine throughout Russia's unprovoked invasion, which began in February 2022. Kyiv has received billions of dollars in security assistance from Washington since the war began, and the US has continued to provide Ukraine with vital intelligence to aid its forces on the battlefield.